Everybody, and welcome to ABM Answered, the quickfire demand generation and ABM video series. I'm here with Joe, who is totally capable of introducing himself in a second. But again, to give a short overview of the concept of this series, Joe, in this case, will be given 7 questions to respond to, all about account-based marketing and demand generation. These questions have come in from or have been adapted based on the data that we've collected from mixed reality rooms, where over 1,000 marketers have gone through and stated what their biggest headaches are and struggles and challenges are with demand gen and ABM at the moment. Joe, I will hand it over to you to give an intro.
Oh, thanks, Sam. As I said, I'm Joe Minchin. I'm Managing Director of Nyala Marketing. And amongst other things, over the last 10 years or so, I've been delivering ABM campaigns for a variety of B2B businesses, from professional services through to some of the big tech players. And so over that time, I've developed some opinions.
Good. We like opinionated people. This is good, especially in today's market. You've got to have a strong, firm opinion, I think, to stand out, or you just blend into the crowd. Right. So let's just jump straight in. Problem 1 that came in was target account selection. So my question on this to you would be, how would you approach this? What insights or metrics are most important to you in identifying a good account? And for me personally, on top of that, and I always ask this question, how do you determine the number of accounts you're going to go after based on kind of like your resources?
Yeah, good question. I think fundamentally, like lots of things about ABM, it entirely depends why you're doing ABM and what you're trying to achieve. Because on the one hand, you'll have organizations that will use ABM to grow within some of their key accounts, expand the scope of the work that they do with them. Others might be using it to target some greenfield accounts. Others might even be using it to say, right, we want to go into a new sector. Let's find a flagship client that we can win and then grow. And so it totally depends on what you're trying to achieve as to what's appropriate. But I think for what you should look for within the accounts, there's some obvious bread and butter hygiene stuff. You need to make sure that they're the right size. You need to make sure that they're potentially on the right tech stack for what you're looking to sell to them. But once you get beyond that, there are some slightly almost sort of softer attributes which are really important to look at. One of them is looking at internally, what does your account team for that specific account look like? Are they actually engaged with this as an approach? Are you going to be able to get their time? And you're going to need quite a lot of their time on calls, on developing content. Can you actually sort of access that from them? So that's really important. The second thing that's really important is going to be looking at the size of the opportunity that you can get with them. There's no point investing in, especially sort of one-to-one, one-to-few ABM, if the size of the opportunity is a few grand. It needs to be big. And so sort of finally on it, the kind of one of the ways of identifying them, if you really are starting from scratch, is to maybe have a look at your existing account set. Who are you doing really good work with? Who do your people love working with? Who's really profitable? And then using those to identify lookalike accounts. And that can be a really fertile sort of hunting ground to start with.
Awesome. And what tools do you use for that, if any?
Well, so I think there are lots of tools that you can use for this, and there are automated approaches that you can use, for example, around looking at technographic information. There's also so much that you can do with looking at sort of account propensity modeling based on, for example, like digital metrics. And that's all great and really useful. But ultimately, the actual decision making should really be done by individuals sitting down, having a conversation about strategically where does this fit with the organization. I think it's one of those things that automating the upfront strategic part of ABM too much is a real risk.
Okay. Is it a case of getting insights from marketing, talk to sales give you the insights on what accounts are responding well and why they believe they're responding well, and then marketing's job is to go away and find accounts that are almost identical or very similar to those accounts? Is the optimal way of doing it is kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, broadly. I think it's one of those that I think it's trying to come up with standard principles that work across every single organization. Is you're kind of on a hiding to nothing, or you're always going to end up oversimplifying. And I think in a lot of cases, if you look at where sales have been really successful, and then you look at what are the relevant attributes of those accounts they've been really successful in, it might be that they're in a specific sector. It might be that they've got a particular tech stack. It might be they're in a particular geographic location. And as an example, worked with a client a while ago, a systems integrator, and we were trying to do this exercise of identifying lookalike accounts. And actually what the analysis revealed was that the biggest influencer in them doing really well with the account was just the geographic location of it. It was them being in that case, a Midlands-based business. It was sort of totally sector agnostic, and that was something that had never really been considered before. And so it is worth always sitting down and actually having a look at the data and having a sensible conversation around it.
Okay, that's the gold I'm looking for here, because that's the stuff people overlook, right? Especially in like the globally connected world. Another guest also said like what's working really well for them at the moment from an ABM perspective is like cold calling. Like who would have thought that? Like these old kind of traditional ways of working. But that's brilliant. So problem 2, finding innovative ways to cut through the B2B noise while adhering to budget constraints is the problem that came in. So my second question is, what have you seen working recently besides the geographic location, maybe kind of segmentation, but both from an ABM and demand generation perspective?
I think this sort of question of how to do ABM on a tight budget is one of my absolute favorites, because despite that, I'm from an agency background, run an agency, I love to do big, complicated ABM projects. They do not have to be really, really complex. If you do not have a big budget, you can still do fantastic, super effective account-based marketing. And I think as an example of that, one of the most effective campaigns I ever worked on was for a large systems integrator targeting a load of telcos. And what we did is we took an existing piece of thought leadership they'd produced. We got the client partners for each of the accounts that we were targeting to go through that with some post-its and to write why each sort of key point out of the from the thought leadership paper related directly to their account, and importantly, what they recommended they do about it. Stuck those post-its on, put it in an envelope, and sent it out to the key execs at the client account, and got huge, like amazing return on investment on it. And the point is, it's not always about doing big, whizzy, complicated, flashy stuff. It's about having the right message at the right time to the right person. It's as basic as that. And so I think a tight budget sometimes can force you to put more effort into that upfront messaging alignment work. And that can be more effective than doing complicated video series, doing big flashy events that you can invite key execs to, taking them all on track days, all of that sort of classic ABM stuff. I think it's a boon rather than anything.
I've never heard of that approach before. That's refreshing. But
I'm just giving away my secret tactic.
That's amazing. I've got nothing to follow on that. That's great. Problem 3 that came in: time to market. So it takes too long to set up and build campaigns. So I guess that's a nice follow on from what you've just said. It doesn't have to be flashy and big in prep. It can literally be done in maybe an hour, across maybe an hour, too optimistic. But how would you speed this up? Like your time to market, and perhaps highlighting the biggest pitfalls of what are the biggest holdups typically with campaigns?
Yeah. Okay. So time to market is always an issue with ABM. Definitely, there is some necessary upfront combination of strategy and grunt work that you just have to do to make it work, to understand the account landscape, to align the messages. You can't skip that bit. It's absolutely essential, and that does take a bit of time. What I see a lot of organizations doing is laying out these big, grand ABM go-to-market plans, and then not getting started on them until they have produced absolutely everything, and it takes months and months and months. That stuff's still always going to take months and months. If you're going to produce bespoke thought leadership for individual accounts, it is going to take months to do. It just does. That's the nature of it. But once you've defined that messaging and you've got your data set, you can provide that account-specific messaging to the sales team to start using in their conversations they're having with these accounts already, start delivering value that way, as you, at the same time, You can launch your sort of air cover of your social ads, your organic social, your account targeted ads. You can launch all of that stuff really quite quickly. Once you've got your messaging, you've got your overarching creative idea, you can start producing some of those easier to create assets and just get those out into market. Because what that means is that when you come in a couple of months later with your heavier hitting tactics around perhaps thought leadership or around events, is you've already got a bit more of that brand awareness and a bit more saliency with them. And so I'd say my kind of number one bit of advice here, my top bit of advice, is don't wait until everything's done to get stuff into market. Is as soon as you're ready with the messaging, start applying it, start getting stuff out the door, because time in market is always valuable.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And so you can plan out the big picture, which doesn't take too long. It's the grunt work that takes a while, and then start like drip feeding the sales team and start deploying ads and whatnot, depending on what ABM program you're running.
Yeah, and importantly with this is you need to ABM works best when you approach it in a relatively agile manner. It can't be a total free-for-all, but really you're always going to be making a lot of assumptions about what your target audience, what the given account is interested in. So if you take, for example, you're targeting an enterprise account, you've got sources of information like their company reports, interviews with the CEO, all of that stuff, which is publicly available. You can draw quite a nice picture of what they're interested in, but ultimately you don't know the detail of it and you don't know what's accurate until you start putting the material out, getting reactions from them and adapting to it.
Okay, I like that a lot, yeah. Because also, in, I don't know, 6 months' time, might be dead news at that point, right? Or they might have even left the company.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Problem 4, leveraging your champion effectively. So I imagine like this, maybe some context to this would be to do with multiple stakeholders in like every decision-making process at the moment. So once you have a contact at a target account, how do you enable them? What do you like arm them with in terms of like content or materials, if any? What methods or approaches or tactics do you use to get them to effectively advocate your message?
You need to, so I think it's really useful if you can get into an account and get a foothold with a champion who believes in what you're trying to sell into the account, and will act as your sort of inside guy. You need to not scare them off, but also not be scared of using them. And it's a balance. You need to find a balance, because if you just start bombarding them with requests to introduce you in all around the organization, they're going to get annoyed quite quickly. But equally, if you've got this resource, you need to make effective use of it. And one of them, and when it comes to how you can do that, one way that can be really effective is if you start showing up together with them. And so things like inviting them for speaker slots. If you and they can both appear, or you being sort of a client lead or an SME within the organization, can appear with them at industry events. Invite them to that. They'll be happy to do it often because it's a profile raiser for themselves, helps them get promoted, get a new job, whatever. But it also just starts to show you and them appearing publicly together. It also gets you in front of a lot more of their immediate in-house contacts as well. They'll be pushing it out over their socials. They'll all be seeing it. It just starts to get people to associate your organization with their organization as well. I think tied to that, interacting with them as much as possible in a public way. So, for example, over LinkedIn, it just starts to build those associations. And then when it comes to actually using them to sort of push forward and grow within the account, the most valuable thing that you can do for them is do their business cases and do their proposals for them. I found this not just on behalf of clients, but even sort of when I've worked in a sort of account role within agencies. If you can if you can help them put together their business cases, you're immediately setting yourself up for success. You can help shape the program, the implementation, whatever it is that you're trying to sell, from the inside out.
That's brilliant. Yeah, no one wants to do extra work, do they, for the sake of doing extra work? So it's a case of, all right, so it's a case of what you said of just, I need like 5 minutes, maybe not 5 minutes again, I'm underestimating all this time involved, but like, give us all the information, we'll put together all the grunt work, here you go, this is going to go make you look great kind of thing. This is what's going to make the change for your career. Okay, fantastic.
Exactly. And for a new solution. So I think you've got, if it's a distressed purchase that they're making, then okay, they're going to do the business case themselves. They're going to put it all together. They absolutely have to. But if it's more a discretionary type purchase, they don't want to put in the extra. They don't want to put in the effort to putting together the business cases to be requesting additional budget for this stuff. If you can put together a business case for them that achieves what they want to achieve, and all they really need to do is make a few edits and then present it to their boss, that's one of the most effective ways that you can use them.
Interesting. And I listened to a podcast yesterday about something similar, and they said when dealing with a champion, or you've got someone that's interested in your services, especially when it's discretionary or like a nice to have, let's say, their number one concern isn't whether, I don't think necessarily the work, like the work is a big factor of it, but also it's a case of addressing their concerns of like, is this going to make me look like a fool if I push it through? Anyway, I don't know if you have any comments on that, but I found that fascinating. It's not about the upside. It's more about like, I don't want to take this to my colleagues if it's going to make me look silly or if it's not going to work. Did you find that? Do you have to address concerns? Do you do that in your pitch and proposals?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just thinking similarly to how at a previous agency that I worked for and actually got mixed reality, sort of helped get mixed reality rooms through the door. It was a case of the sort of way that went was initial outreach sort of from you to me, and then you quite quickly got me really believing in what mixed reality rooms do, and then I essentially became an internal champion for that within the organisation that I was working for. I did a presentation on it to the whole of client services, and then a few months down the line you end up getting a call, and that's your route in. I think if you can get your champion to really believe in what you're selling and totally on your side, they're gonna go put a bit of effort into to convince their colleagues that it's a good idea.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I did that, but also based on what you said prior to that, I feel like I didn't do enough for you then, because I remember giving you like the experience because it was very early days, and it was like, hey Joe, what do you think of this? So you did us a favor back then as well, I guess, which I appreciate. Okay, problem 5: personalization at scale. So how would you approach this? And my follow-on question, I guess, is what are marketing responsible for as opposed to sales? Because you've got to give sales, as you were saying earlier, some freedom to, like, the news is just in, like they've seen something, like let them contact their key accounts. But personalization at scale, big question. I'll hand it over to you.
That's an absolutely massive question, personalization at scale. I think first point is personalizing appropriately and usefully. I think this whole idea that ABM is stick the account name and their personal name on the top of an email, that's absolute nonsense. That's not ABM. That is a proper bare minimum, is that level of personalization. So I think we're talking about personalization at scale. It's getting more custom messages sort of to the right people at scale. And there's lots of different ways and levels you can do that at. I think one thing that says always towards the beginning of the planning stage of an ABM campaign is you'd want to have a messaging map laid out. It doesn't need to be particularly complicated, but essentially laying out per account, probably on an Excel spreadsheet, what's the key message to each of those accounts? How does that vary by each of the different personas within that account? And it's having that sort of messaging map. Once you've got that, that is useful as an asset to provide to sales. Because if you're really sort of bootstrapping this, if you're really doing it at a sort of low budget level, you're not producing lots of fancy marketing comms as part of the campaign. Providing sales with that personalized message means that when they pick up the phone or when they send those emails, they've got these little sort of set phrases and bits that they can drop into their communications, and that is a good way of doing it at scale. If you're really going bigger than that, there are some quite interesting new approaches to personalization at scale using something like emerging tech, which I think is really fun. So personalization at scale is possible to do, for example, in video nowadays. There's a company called Synesthesia. I think I got that right, which is kind of creepy, but I absolutely love. You can produce, if you've worked out your messaging by account and you can put that into maybe like 10 different scripts, you can plug that into Synesthesia and produce personalized videos for 10 separate accounts within the space of a few hours. It's amazing. And then
Yeah.
likewise, it's using things, so if you need to do email copy or small changes to blog posts, that type of content, ChatGPT you can use to some extent for that. It still requires a human to actually go through and make sure it's sensible, but you can feed it in the personalized messaging and the core asset and then get AI to do that for you.
Yeah, that's a strong answer. And also Synthesia, we're looking to use it as well, because when people jump into experiences, we tell, ideally the account rep will greet them and say, hey Joe, thanks for joining and all this sort of stuff. But this is a way of, I don't know if it's good or bad, but we're getting the feeling it's a good idea. We're going to try and make, to be able to create an experience, it's like an email campaign. It's like, hey, X name, this, we made this for you, and we're going to create like 100 experiences at like three clicks rather than doing it one by one. And Synthesia is going to hopefully play a part in that in recording the welcome videos. Problem 6, incorporating diversity and inclusion into your marketing strategy. So how are you incorporating this into kind of client briefs and supporting maybe your clients at the moment, specifically from an external kind of point of view? So incorporating it into the pitch potentially.
Yeah. So I think it's, again, diversity and inclusion is a really broad topic for marketing. And there's, on the one hand, there's some really quite simple stuff, but vitally important, but quite basic things that all of us working in marketing should be doing, like applying inclusive design principles to everything that we produce. So it's things like when you're designing white papers, when you're designing websites, is making sure you're considering like the color contrast, the font, so that people who are differently abled are able to actually engage with them in the way that you want them to be able to engage with them. And it's like there's some basic principles around that which should really be applying to everything. From a diversity point of view, there's also a kind of a simple end to it as well, which is that it is using things like diverse imagery and diverse and inclusive language in whatever we write. At a more sort of complicated level, at the more sort of strategic and messaging level, I think that's where there's a lot more work to be done, and it's a lot more complicated, especially when it comes to sort of personas within ABM. So I think we can all be guilty of setting out personas. So say, I don't know, you've got a solution that's targeted at IT directors. You immediately in your head have a vision of an IT director as some like 50-year-old bloke who probably went to a red brick uni, likes playing golf, and it's very, very easy and lazy to just take those basic assumptions that you have about specific roles and to perpetuate them through the types of content that you produce. Whereas actually, if you include a broader range of people in the decision-making and strategic process up front, with a broader range of experiences and just a diversity of individuals, and you also incorporate a bit more primary research, you can avoid having some of those biases and get around them. But I think in terms of how you actually use diversity and inclusion as a real sort of positive within ABM, I've done some work on a campaign a few years ago. I think did this really fantastically. And so it was a sort of mid-sized systems integrator, again targeting a telco. And this systems integrator, they had a fantastic within the organization. They were really, really passionate about LGBTQ+. That was a big thing for them. It wasn't just paying lip service to it. It was something that the people really cared about. They invested a lot of time and effort into a lot of different initiatives and programs. It turned out during the initial ABM account research, the telco they were targeting also really valued it. It was a proper sort of passion area for them as well. So we ran an entire stream of the ABM program around setting up a joint LGBTQ plus event series for them that was co-branded. Did it have anything to do with the service they're actually selling? Absolutely not. No, we're nowhere near it. Sorry, I didn't really nowhere near it, but it was very, very separate. But did it mean that all the people within the target account started associating the systems integrator as, yeah, these are kind of the people that they believe in the things that we do. We've got a really good cultural fit. They're very much front of mind. Absolutely. I think it's using it in a way that is genuine and authentic. You can do some fantastic things. You just need to avoid what lots and lots of organizations do, which is take diversity and inclusion that they just don't care about at a management level or a corporate level, and then just splashing some headlines around and adapting their messaging to sort of do the sort of diversity wash their communications, because I can't see through that straight away. The audience always sees through that.
For sure. That's a phenomenal answer. I can see the value of this. Do you have any like metric off the top, not off the top of your head, but like clearly see how it works, but I can also see it will take a lot more time. So it's not a way to streamline your campaigns, but is there like an no? It's just like an
I think
outcome.
in that case, it's the sort of brand v demand sort of the brand v demand approach. So on the one hand, you could use ABM to directly sell it. Right, we need to target sales immediately, generating more sales, or you could treat it more like a brand exercise, an account-based brand exercise, which is we really need to build certain perceptions within the account of us. That, which is where the DNI stuff would fit it and is more on a kind of brand level. That will make it a lot easier to sell in the future, and it will sort of translate to increased sales.
I can 100% see it working. I never even thought about taking it that one step further, because I'm also fed up with just, we care about this, and you're like, no, you don't. Like, this is like a plug.
A lot of people tend to view ABM with a really narrow lens. They tend to see it as entirely short-term demand focused. And I fundamentally believe that it's totally different to that. It's almost like a branding exercise with a specific account. It can be really long-term. It doesn't have to be short-term. And that's where the example that I gave previously fits in. It's a long-term play.
Okay. So that's why you need to identify that they're worth it for you in the long run. It's like a brand. Question 7. We've made it. Final question. Kind of the last, following on from the last one, scaling. So what approach you take to scaling? We touched upon it with the personalization. For me, the 2 sub questions here, there's 2 ways to take this as well. Like, we've just got that challenge in, but like, how do you know when to, well, a lot of big names out there say focus on one channel before going to another one. Like, how do you know when to scale onto different channels for that set of target accounts you're going after? And then how do you know when to increase the number of target accounts? So there are 2 different ways of scaling, I guess.
Yeah. So I think for the channel scaling question, first of all, I would say, no, just bear in mind, when I'm talking about ABM, I'm normally more on the one-to-one, one-to-few, really high value, really sort of high value services ABM. So most of the clients that I've worked with across my career, it's multi-million-dollar deals that they're looking at. And so that's the angle that I'm coming to from this. Because I'd always say I'd never advise starting a one-channel ABM campaign at all. It would be, you can keep the channels reasonably simple, but I'd say it just doesn't make sense to go through the upfront sort of strategic and messaging work and data work that's required, and then say, right, off the back of this, we're going to run an email campaign or a calling campaign or a programmatic display campaign, or just to do one channel. It should always be multi-channel, properly integrated marketing, because that's what works with these complex deals. And so I don't see scaling from one channel to multiple channels generally as a particular challenge, but I can see, when do you add a new channel into the campaign? When do you broaden out the complexity of what you're doing? And I'd say that will be once you've proven that the core works, is a good time for that. When it comes to scaling out the number of accounts, so I always push to start with a really small ABM program, an ABM pilot, with an account, with an organization that's not done much in the way of ABM before, or they're really fundamentally changing their approach. Starting with 1 or maybe 2 accounts, I always think is the best way to do it, because you get any provider that comes in, sort of Nyala included, but sort of many other brands available. Everyone will come to you with a set process that looks really, really simple. For, oh yeah, you've got this as the 6-point plan to delivering ABM, or the 3-point, or the 7-point, or the 9-point, or whatever it is. It looks really simple. That will never be how it actually rolls out in your organization. Every organization has its own challenges, friction points, quirky ways of working. Over the course of the initial pilot that you do, you will build out your organization-specific ABM approach. And I think you need to do a pilot in order to get to that stage. And then once you've got to that stage and you know that it works, and you've got a case study of it working within your organization, that's the time to start rolling it out more broadly.
Okay, good. Great answers. Joe, thanks so much. That's it. Thanks for joining. In terms of prizes, because I did promise prize, we're sending out space goods. Have you ever had space goods before? No?
I've never had a space good, no.
Okay.
The trip on the International Space Station? On the Virgin Galactic or something?
I'm going to get sued here, aren't I? Yeah, for not delivering. No, Space Goods is a type of it's a type of coffee. It's really, really good. I'll send it to you. The last question I have is, do you have a question or a topic you think we should ask our next guest?
I think it's not so much a question, but as a topic that's really interesting to discuss is what do you do within an organization when there are very diverse understandings of what ABM actually is? Because you come across that so often is the sales team or someone within sales has a particular view of what ABM is. The marketing director has a view of what ABM is. The ABM provider they bring in has a third view of what ABM is. How do people manage that as a challenge?
So who makes the final decision? How do you align the teams? All of those intricacies.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's also a good question. Big question. Anyway, thanks so much again for joining, Joe.